Hey guys, it's Christy from ConfessionsOfASerialDIYer.com, and today I'm back sharing how I paint a piece of furniture using chalk style paint. I'm going to be using Dixie Belle products. I love their products. I sell them in my booth and I sell them online in my Etsy shop, which I will link below. But you can use any kind of chalk style paint. All the major brands on the market, they all work pretty great. I even have a DIY version that I love that I will link to also. I'm using Dixie Belle today though. I'm going to use to do this little night table that I picked up. I picked up a pair of these for $10 a piece at the thrift store. So I'm going to do this piece from start to finish, and then I'll skip over to this piece since it's already dry and ready to be sanded, and I'll show you how I sand. So I'm going to gather some supplies and get set up, and I'll be right back. All right guys, I've gathered everything that we're going to use today to chalk paint a piece of furniture. Starting with something to clean it. That's really the only prep that most pieces need when you're using a chalk style paint. So I like to use just regular wipes. These are just Walmart brand. They work great. You can also use a TSP substitute, like White Lightning by Dixie Belle works great also. I love these. You're gonna need some paint. I'm using Dixie Belle's Vintage Duck Egg Blue and Dixie Belle's Cotton. I'm gonna do a 50-50 mix of both. I love this color, but I love it even more lightened up a little bit, so I'm gonna mix those. I've got just 2 plastic cups so I can mix out equal parts of each. A stir stick, of course, to stir them. I like to use just a piece of sandpaper. This is from my Orbital sander to remove the lids once they get stuck a little bit. This is amazing, it works so great. Also gonna need a brush. This is my favorite. It's a Purdy XL Cub. You can find them at Lowe's. I've also purchased them online. Dixie Belle also makes one. Theirs is very similar to this also, a little pricier, but very similar. And then this has a really soft edge to it, which helps minimize brush strokes. So a quality brush is absolutely key. You need a screwdriver or a drill to remove your hardware, which I've already removed the hardware off the piece I'm sharing today. And then I'm going to also show you how to sand your piece when you're done. This is 220 grit sandpaper. I buy this on Amazon. You can also find it at any hardware store. I buy it in large sheets, and then I rip it into 4 rectangles, and I wrap it around an old sanding block. This thing has been used a lot, but it makes it much easier to grab and grasp the sandpaper. I've got some gloves in case you want to protect your manicure, and then a drop cloth if you want to protect your area. And also, I'm going to wrap my brush in just some regular old Glad cling wrap. That's the cheapest and best way to store these brushes in between uses or in between coats. All right, I think that's everything. I'm going to go ahead and prep my area and we'll get started. All right, before we can get started painting, I am going to mix up my paint. I mentioned that I'm going to use 50-50 of the Vintage Duck Egg Blue and the Cotton. So I'm going to start by pouring. I'm almost out of my cotton, so I'm gonna start there. Normally I would just eyeball it and just add some of this, add some of that, stir it up and go. But because I have 2 pieces to do, should I run out, I want to make sure that I'm using the same of each. So I'm going to use my cups here. All right. You probably really should like wipe off the lid and keep it. I don't, I'm so bad. So mine get really crusty and gross. Half of them don't even go on all the way anymore. That's why I really need this. Okay, so I've got half and half. That looks pretty even to me. And then I'm just going to mix one into the other, just so I get a consistent mix. It's the same as what I used before. I like to do it in small batches so that I'm not stuck with a bunch left over in case I don't plan to use this mixture for a while. All right, I'm just gonna stir it. I'm just going to keep mixing until there's no more white in there. There you go. Now I've got a really pretty lighter color that I love. All right. guys, the first thing you're gonna wanna do before you get started on your piece is give it a really good cleaning. I've already wiped this one down and it has dried. The wipes dry really, really quickly. So I've just got the drawer to go. It's really important to wipe off any dirt, grime, grease, anything that might prevent the paint from sticking. Now I want to talk about prep for just a second. One of the joys of using chalk paint is that there is really hardly any prep involved. There is no need to sand. I know a lot of people say that they do it anyway. Honestly, I've never had an issue. There's no need. I stand behind that. There's really no need to sand. There's no need to sand and there's no need to prime. However, you will run into issues if you have a cherry or a mahogany piece that is like an antique piece because they were sealed differently or what have you. I don't know the science behind that, but the tannins will tend to bleed through the paint. And you may not even realize until you've already started painting, which is heartbreaking. So just know that if you have an antique cherry or mahogany piece, that you may want to test it in an inconspicuous area first, make sure it's not going to bleed. Or you may just want to go ahead and just be cautious and go ahead and give it a prime. And what I would use for that is a product called Dixie Belle's Boss, B-O-S-S. It comes in a clear formula and it comes in a white. So if you're going to paint something white, you could use the white and it'll save you a coat of paint actually. If you're using clear and you were going to say, if you wanted to sand, you didn't want white to come through the finish, you would use the clear version. But you put it on basically, let it dry overnight, and 9 times out of 10, that is all the prep you need to do. Once or twice, I've had to give it another coat and let it dry overnight again. Allowing it the proper amount of time to dry is key to making it work well. There you can also use like shellac that you can find at any hardware store. That is super, super stinky. You would definitely want to do something like that in a very well ventilated area or take it outside. But I haven't had as good of a success rate with that. I've done that and sometimes still had to find other ways to try and seal in those tannins. So just a note, for the most part, you do not need prep with chalk paint other than giving your piece a good cleaning. All right? So this is all clean and ready to go. I'm gonna grab my paint and we'll go ahead and get started painting. All right, we're getting ready to get started painting. This is the part where you may want to put down a drop cloth. Even if you aren't a messy painter, it's easy to splatter the paint, so it's probably a good idea to put down a drop cloth. I love to use this little stool. You can see me rolling around on it. And I can't do that with the drop cloth, so I'm just gonna go ahead and go without. But I do always raise it up off the ground on something. You can use soup cans, you can use just something to get it up off the ground so that you don't get paint on your floor. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. When I chalk paint something, I always start at the bottom, no matter what it is, and I usually start at the back. And this will give me a chance to see bleed through coming through usually before I get around to the front. Now, if you do get bleed through, one thing I didn't mention is even if you painted the whole thing, you can still boss it and come back. You can boss right over the paint. Okay. So one thing you will notice is I get tons of questions on brush strokes. Chalk paint is going to leave brush strokes. Anytime you hand paint something, you're probably going to get brush strokes. But the key is to not do this. You know what I mean? Do some nice long strokes. And then even if I do this just to get this edge, I'll come back over it and do a nice long sweeping stroke. I try to go with the grain of the wood, but even if I apply it kind of haphazardly real quickly, I'll come right back over it and do a nice long line. So if you keep in mind while you're painting that you're going to see those brush strokes, they will be so much more minimized if you paint in long sweeping strokes. And again, your brush is key. You can't use a little cheapy brush and expect to get a beautiful finish. So chalk paint dries super quickly also. So you don't want to leave a section started. You know, I've got some that has gone over the edge here. I wouldn't want to leave that because I wouldn't be able to fix that later. It would be dry by the time I came back. So even if I'm putting it on in these short little strokes and going in different directions, I'm always gonna come back and do one long sweeping stroke to smooth it out. All right. Pretty. I love this color. I love it. And so you're gonna see strokes. I mean, you're gonna see the brush strokes in the finish, but it's so like even and you know, that it's gonna minimize the look of them. And also you'll notice I don't paint like this. I usually come back and I'm almost flat when I come back, so that my brush has got a flat surface. Always go back over and smooth it out with the grain of the wood. And even if I just slap it on pretty quick, this is a small section, I can do that. I'll come back. And my brush is almost flat. Like, I think that really helps. Or maybe it does, I don't know, maybe it's just the way I'm used to doing it, but I'm also gonna hit under here because it's got a curve to it and you might see it at different angles. I also like that the brush has an angle to it. Can you see that? It helps to get into corners more easily. I'm just barely going to do this inside lip so that when the drawer is pushed all the way in case you can see that part. I will generally do this inside part too. Great. Go ahead and come to here. Can you see how I'm going straight across on that? My brush is almost flat. And I go all the way from edge to edge. Am I blocking my... You always want to keep a wet edge. Even if you're doing a piece that's really long, you want to go all the way from side to side. A lot of times I'll come at the front this way just to make sure I get it solid all the way to the edge, and then I make sure I come back, smooth it out. I'm gonna try to go from edge to edge. You can actually see where I stopped my brush right there. Ant. Ooh. It's one of the issues of living near the beach. We have to deal with ants every once in a while. It's raining today, and that usually sends them for higher ground. No matter how you apply it, always come back and smooth it out to go with the granular lid. the back of my pieces, I don't always paint, but if it's just a small one like this, you may as well go ahead and clean it up. If it's like a real large piece, I probably wouldn't do that, but I would at least tape it probably right here where the leg meets the back so that I have a nice, neat, clean paint line. I might not do that if I'm painting a piece for myself, but if it's a piece to sell, I try to make it as neat and clean and pretty as possible. All right, and after I've done a side like that where I can't see the front, I'll pop around and make sure I don't have any overage here because it just did go over just a little bit. This too. You can see, oh, we can't see it. It says 1960. This table was manufactured, it looks like. It's just raw wood back here, so it really soaks it up. It doesn't have to be perfect back here. We're not always going to see it really. All right. All right, now we're gonna do the top. Okay, now this first coat of paint looks pretty darn good, but if you were using like a white paint or a really light paint, it's probably gonna look terrible on this first coat. Don't be discouraged, just keep going. Your second coat is where all the magic will happen. So I always leave the top for last because that's the part that I want to look perfect. So if there's an edge, I'll start with the edge. And I will do underside here also, so that when someone buys this and they go to load it into their truck and it's tipped on its side, it won't look like we missed that part, but I'll get that on the second coat. I usually only do one pass of that on a color like this, which really could have gotten away with one coat. So I do my second coat, I'll hit up under here too. So I'm gonna do the sides. Again, I'm going with the flow of the furniture. And if you go over too much here, just wipe that off so that you don't have a little lip of paint there. And the top of this one is pretty small, but it will give you a good idea of what you would do, even if it were like a dresser, a longer. You want to get in that little corner, little edge. All right, so I've loaded up my paint. I'm going to start in the center, and then I'm just going to kind of drag out the paint to the sides, and to the other side. And then I'm going to do one long sweeping stroke. And as you can see, my paintbrush is almost flat when I do that, and that gives me a really pretty edge. So when I do my next pass, I'm barely overlapping the one I just did. And I'm gonna do one sweep all the way from one edge to the very next, to the other edge. If you do a lot of this kind of stuff, you're gonna have an ugly finish. You're gonna have ugly brush strokes. So when I give advice, I say do long sweeping strokes from one edge to the next. But something I noticed, so kind of start in the middle, feather it out to your side. You have to work quickly because this does tend to set up very fast. You might not notice it on your first coat, but on subsequent coats, your paint may appear to get a little bit thick. I don't generally worry about that. I just keep going. But You can thin it down a little bit, and it will make it glide better if you keep a cup of water on hand and just dip your brush in the cup of water a little bit and then dip it into your paint. When you go to apply your paint, it will glide on. That is helpful if you're doing a really wide piece. And the wonderful thing about chalk paint is, I see I've got a little piece here. If you have any little imperfections, you're going to sand this finish when your paint is dry. So you're going to be able to smooth out any imperfections. Chalk paint is very user friendly once you get the hang of it and the feel for it. If you want to tackle a large piece, I highly recommend finding a small piece to practice on. If you haven't done it before, if you're doing it for the first time, just to get the feel of how it goes on. All right, there you go. Really, I mean, the coverage is so beautiful on this piece, you probably could call this done. But I'm gonna give it one more coat just in case. And then, like I mentioned, in between coats, a lot of times by the time you get done with your first coat, it's dry where you started and you can go back and start painting again. So this is what I use to wrap up my brushes, just like this. It's super cheap. All I have to do is take it off and throw it away when I'm done. And I have kept them wrapped up like this for like up to 2 weeks sometimes, which that's really a shame. But that's why when you see my brushes, they usually look pretty gross around this area, but they still work. I rinse them out. I just wash them in warm water. And I can use them for months and months and months and months. Some of them I've had for years. And I'm just gonna cover my cup of paint up also. All right, I'm gonna get this other piece in place and then I'm gonna show you guys how I sand. Okay. All right, guys, now I'm gonna show you how I sand it. I mentioned I use these sheets of 220 grit sandpaper. I buy these on Amazon and I just rip them into 4 and I wrap them around an old foam sanding block. So literally like this, it's so much easier to hold your sandpaper that way. And then I'm just gonna start sanding, and it doesn't matter which order you do it in because we're gonna do pretty much the entire surface. So I'll start with the top. This one I've added a stencil to just for little decoration, and I painted these edges white. So I'm gonna go ahead and sand across the top, right across the stencil. And just like painting, I'm going across the entire surface from edge to edge. And I'm going with the same direction that I did my painting in, which should be the same direction as the wood grain. And then I'm going to hit the edges. And then if you want to distress, this is where you would hit up any edges that you want to distress. I don't like a lot of heavy distressing. I like my pieces to look like they're a little time worn, but I don't want them to look like they've been neglected, sitting on the back porch type worn, you know. This is 220 grit. I don't know if I mentioned that. All right, I'm gonna keep going all the sides. All right. All right, so I'm all finished with my sanding. I wanted to show you a couple things. I want to mention first, if you are sanding, grab yourself a mask. I have the one that's got the little white thing in the center of it, just like a little, that goes behind your ears. I'm usually in the garage and it's just like second nature to grab my mask and sand it, just because you don't want to be breathing all this dust stuff. That's just not good for you. So please wear a mask. Also, I wanted to mention with the drawers, I did paint the sides of these drawers because there was crayon or something all on the inside here, and I didn't want to be selling these pretty new tables and have like crayon and stuff on the inside. So I did paint these, but normally I don't. If these are in good condition, I just leave the wood here and it's fine. I'll paint right to this, from this edge all the way across the front, and I'll tape it off so that it's a nice, neat edge, with my frog tape. And also this one, I plan to put fabric in the drawers, which I like to do as a finishing touch. I did do a video on that already also. I will link that as well. But I painted the bottom of it white just because it's got a white background, and if I don't do that, it will make it look dingy once I apply the fabric to the inside. So I did paint the inside of the drawer white, but normally I would just do the bottom and I would tape it off with my frog tape, and I would just paint only the bottom for a light fabric if I'm going to use a light fabric. A lot of times I'll just use a darker fabric, so that's really not even an issue. So just wanted to mention that. So this is almost done. I'm gonna clean up all the dust. To clean up all the dust, I use a shop vac, just a small shop vac, a little 5-gallon shop vac, and I have the attachment that has the brush on it, and so I'll use that across all the surfaces and pick up all that dust. And then I may even go over it again. I have a clean soft cloth over there. I may even go over it again with a soft cloth and just make sure I've gotten all the dust off of it. And then I'm gonna seal it with the Clear Coat in Satin by Dixie Belle, which I absolutely love. I'm gonna link that video also because I've already done another video showing how to apply that. And then this will be done in no time at all. So I still need to put another coat on that one and paint the drawer and stencil it, but we're on our way to 2 new pieces for my shop. And that didn't take very long at all. So that's it. I hope you learned something. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions whatsoever, please leave them in the comments. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have if I can. If you want to receive my new videos in the future, please subscribe. And if you like this video, I would very much appreciate that also. And that's it. Go paint something. All right. Have a good one.